In this video, we're going to have a look at VAT animation variations. We've already seen how a VAT animation can add movement and change the shape of an existing mesh. With the VAT Man, the animations can also change the mesh's appearance by altering material settings like color and roughness, etc. To demonstrate this, I'm going to revisit the jelly cubes demonstration from before. I have created two further variations of the same animation by simply remodeling the existing mesh of the cubes. Here I have a sphere variation, and I also have a vaguely pyramid-shaped variation. In the end, I will have 3 VAT objects, and my intention is to merge those objects together into one. So as I've seen before, I need the base meshes to be identical, and for that reason I'm going to use the morph function to bake the new shapes and the new animations onto the existing mesh, or more to the point, to a duplicate of the existing mesh. So let's start by creating that duplicate. I'll turn on the screencast key so you can see what I'm doing, and I'll select the VAT object and press Shift-D to create a duplicate. I'm going to hide the original to avoid any confusion, and I'm going to remove the material of my new object. Let's give it a new name. This one's going to be the jelly sphere. There we go. Now I'll very simply select my animated spheres, then shift select the VAT object, the jelly sphere VAT object. My frame range is already correctly set from frame 1 to frame 150, so let's just morph those objects. There we go. Now I'm going to create another duplicate. I'm going to duplicate the sphere VAT objects, and I'll rename it. This one's going to be the pyramid, and again I'll remove that material and hide the spheres to avoid any confusion. Now I'll select the animated pyramids. Now select the jelly pyramid, and once again bake to target. And there we go. Now I can hide the animated collection, and let's have a look at our VAT objects. We've already seen the VAT cubes, they already work. This we know. The pyramids, there they are. And the spheres, and there they are. You'll see that the object is still the original cube object. So with that done, I can select all 3 of these objects and merge them together. We'll have cube, then sphere, then pyramid. That order's fine. Merge. Now let's find the new collection created at the bottom of the list, and let's have a look. We have an object, we have 3 VAT animations, cubes in animation 1, sphere in animation 2, and pyramid in animation 3. Excellent. As I have 3 animations, I'm going to create 3 variations. So with my object selected, I'm going to set atlas size right here under the animations section. Atlas size I'm going to set to 3. And with that set, let's have a look at these numbers here beside each animation. This is where we choose the atlas index for any given animation. So I'm going to set them appropriately to 1, 2, and 3. With that set, let's scoot over to the shading editor, and let's have a look. I'll start with the original cube animation. Now here in the shader editor, we have options to add some VAT-based nodes. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using the color and the value switchers. You'll see this number change as you adjust the atlas size for any given object, and that's because the node will have a suitable number of inputs when created based on the atlas size set at that time. So I'll click to add a color switcher, and you'll see I have a node here with 3 color inputs and an atlas data input. That atlas data comes from my VAT Man node right there. So let's connect those 2 sockets together. I'm going to copy the original color into color number 1. And I'm actually going to copy it into all 3 channels so I can make variations of that color. I'll choose a light blue color. And for animation 3, I'll choose a lime green. Hook that up to base color. And let's have a look at what happens when we change the animation. you can see that the color changes. We can do the same with value-based inputs with a value switcher node. It again requires the Atlas data input, so we'll hook that up. And we're going to connect this to the roughness input. So to begin with, I'm going to set all three values to the original roughness value of 0.05. I'll hook that up to the roughness input of the principled BSDF. As before, I'm going to leave the cubes unchanged. Let's increase the roughness a little bit for the spheres, and we'll increase it even more for the pyramids. And there we have it. We now have three very different shapes from one single mesh and one material and one set of VAT textures. If I click on From Start, you'll see how I can start the animation playing from the beginning as soon as I change the animation. And that is how you use the VAT Man to add material variations. To expand upon this idea, let me show you how I put together this model. We have a single mesh with two materials, one for the body and one for the eyes. In rendered view, she looks like this. She is animated, and in actual fact, there are a grand total of 6 characters, all coming from one set of VAT textures, all with 3 different animations each and seemingly individual materials, one for each character, even though that is not the case. So let me show you how I put that together. Here I have my 6 armature animated characters, each one with their own materials and their own textures. And I'm going to bake all of these characters to VAT and then merge the 6 VAT characters together into one. So we'll start by selecting the armature, heading over to the animation tab, and let's set up some markers to delineate the end of the animations. In this case, I'm actually going to give the markers names. I'm going to name them after the animation of which they mark the end. So we've got walk, jog, and this one we'll call stagger. I'm going to head back to the standard view, select the armature and reset it into a T-pose. And let's set about baking. Now I'm actually going to take advantage of a new feature that I actually just added last night, so this doesn't appear in previous videos. And this feature uses any markers that you've placed along the timeline to separate the single VAT animation into individual sub-animations. And this second option is whether or not you want to use any names associated to those markers to assign names to the animations. I'm going to check both of those options on. And with my mesh selected and my frame range correctly set, I'm just going to click on Bake Objects and bake out that first VAT animation. There we go. I'll hide the armature animated character and check out the VAT. And here we have our 3 animations, correctly named according to the names of the markers. It's a handy new little feature that should save everyone some time in naming animations. Let's just check the animations are correct. Walk, jog, and stagger, all looking excellent. So, as we know, to merge the VAT characters together, I need their initial pose to be identical. So I'm going to use duplicates of this original VAT bake with the materials removed. And I'm going to use the morph function to bake the following character animations to this base mesh. So I'll select the African male mesh, shift select my blank VAT object, and again I'm going to use the markers to animations and the use names functions, and let's bake to target. There we go. Before I go any further, I'm going to give my VAT objects accurate names. The first one is African female, AF for African and Fem for female. The second one is African male, again AF and MAL for male. Let's create a number of duplicates for following VAT bakes, blank duplicates. Got one, I'm going to duplicate it and then Shift and R twice. So now I have 4 objects here, 4 blank objects waiting for VAT bakes. Here we have the Asian female mesh. Select its blank and bake to target. Very good. Now we have the Asian male. Select its blank. If you can see that I've selected it there, the third one from the end. Once again, bake to target. Excellent. Now we have the Caucasian female. Bake to target. And finally the Caucasian male. Shift select his blank and bake to target. Excellent. At this point I should be done with my armature animated characters. I'm going to give my VAT bakes accurate names. This is Asian female, Asian male, Caucasian female, and finally Caucasian male. That'll help me distinguish the meshes and their animations once I've merged them all together. Let's see how they look. Everyone marching along in unison. Jog and stagger, all looking excellent. So we're ready to merge. With all my objects selected, I'm going to click on merge. Check the order. Should be African, Asian, Caucasian, and female, then male. In all cases, we're ready to go. So quick merge. And I'll hide the VAT bakes and let's see our merged object. We've got a lot of animations now, so shortly I will be taking advantage of the compact animations list view, but for now I want to see the names of the animations, and they are in fact correct. You can see that the shape of the mesh and the animations are changing accordingly, but the material is as yet unaffected. This VAT bake is actually quite large, so I expect to see some errors that I'm going to have to go and correct. And there they are, in fact. Okay, let's roll down to material settings here, and let's drag up the correction for the body material until all those broken polygons have disappeared. That looks pretty good to me. Yep, I think that'll work. Okay, so as we have 6 individual characters, I'm going to set the atlas size for this object to 6. Now I'm going to set the atlas index for these animations to suitable numbers. I'm going to use the compact view just to speed this up. For the first 3, which is the African female, I'm going to leave that set to 1. The African male, I'll set to 2 for all 3 of his animations. And finally 6 for the Caucasian male. Okay, so to use these atlas indices, we'll head over to the shading editor, and we've already seen a similar thing to this, but this time I'm not going to use the color switchers because that would mean that I would need 6 individual textures for albedo, 6 individual textures for roughness, and that would make for a very heavy material. So to avoid that, I'm going to use a VAT atlas. Now, I don't have a VAT atlas quite yet, so let's go down here to the Atlas Creation section and make one. Roll down Atlas Maker, and we'll click on New Atlas. This is not actually creating the atlas just yet, this is just the atlas settings. So I'll call this albedo because I'm going to bake out the albedo atlas. If you don't actually know what an atlas is, it's a texture. It's simply a large texture which consists of a number of smaller textures all combined into one. So let's select those textures. This is going to be my albedo texture. So right here is where I choose the textures to include in this atlas. And here I have African female albedo. I'm going to add to that the African male albedo, followed by Asian female, Asian male, Caucasian female, and Caucasian male. Here you can see the arrangement of the atlas. These are the textures that I chose, laid out in a bottom-up arrangement. Blender will use bottom-up arrangements, while Unity and Godot all seem to use top-down arrangements, which is why I have included this option here to very quickly bake out several versions of the same atlas. You'll want one for Blender and one for all the external engines, essentially. So before I go any further, I'm going to save that layout in case I need to reload it later on. For example, if I want to create a top-down version of this atlas. For now, the Blender version will be suitable, so I'm going to click on Create Atlas, and let's give it a name. I'll call this Multi-Character Albedo Atlas. Click Create Atlas, and there we go. Now we have a brand new texture to be used in our multi-character animation. Let me actually just show you the atlas. This is one of the original textures. That's the African female. This would be the African male, etc., etc. You can see the size. I do a quick search for atlas. There we go. You can see that we've got 6 textures all combined into one. So this is my albedo texture. I'm going to set it to use my newly baked atlas. And as you can imagine, the model's albedo breaks somewhat. Let's come down to the N tab and open the VAT Man panel. I'm going to click to add a VAT Atlas node. There it is. It's already correctly set with the X frames and the Y frames by the manager. It needs a UV map input, which goes into the vector, and the Atlas data comes from the VAT Man node. So I'll connect those sockets and plug the result into the vector socket of my texture node. And there we go. The texture looks much better. And let's see what happens when I select new characters. There we go. Now we have the materials changing suitably depending on the currently selected character. I'm going to quickly do the same thing for the eyes material. But first I need the eyes atlas. I'm going to come back to the layout view just for a little more space. I'll create a new atlas. We'll call this eyes albedo. And I'll add in the textures. I only have 2 eyes textures, brown and blue, so I'm just going to alternate them for a little variation from character to character. Brown, blue, brown, blue. Okay, this is going to be my result. I think I'll save that layout as well, just in case. And let's create it. We'll call it Multi-Eyes Albedo Atlas and create it. Back to the shader editor, and let's set up our eyes material to use that atlas. There we go. Add the VAT Atlas node, add the UV map node. Bring over our VAT Man node and hook up Atlas data and connect it to the texture node. And there we go. Brown eyes, blue eyes, brown eyes, blue eyes, etc., etc. Very quickly, I'm going to do the same thing for the roughness textures for the body. Create a new atlas, roughness, and select my textures. African female roughness, African male roughness, Asian female, Asian male, Caucasian female, and Caucasian male. I'll save that layout, create the atlas. And this one is going to be multi-character roughness. Create that atlas. And back to the shader editor to set up our material to use our roughness atlas. Set it to non-color data and a quick reload to get all our textures working correctly. And there we have it. 6 characters, 3 animations per character, all from one mesh, 2 materials, and 1 set of VAT textures. Let's have a closer look at the Atlas Maker panel and the available options. We've already seen what the new Atlas function does. Beside it, we have the Load Atlas button, which allows us to reload an atlas arrangement that we saved earlier. Here we are given the name of the currently selected atlas layout. You can change that as you wish. And here we have a list of the textures currently included in that atlas layout. From this drop-down menu at the bottom of the list, we can add new textures to the list, and to remove any given texture from the list, simply click on it, and that will remove it from the list. I'm going to add that one back in. To remove all textures from the list, click on Clear Textures, and they're all gone. I'm just going to reload that roughness atlas so it's as it was before. As you make changes to the current atlas layout, you can click here to save those changes, or you can click on Save As to give it a name and save it as a new layout without affecting the currently loaded one. Here at the top you have the option to resize textures. Now you should make this choice at the very beginning of creating your atlas layout, because if you change this mid-layout, you'll see that all the textures get removed. I'm going to reload the roughness atlas layout. Now the resize textures function does exactly what it says. It allows you to resize textures. The size variables for width and height refer to the individual cells of the atlas. So each texture as it gets added to the atlas will be resized to these given variables. If you choose not to resize the textures as you add them to the atlas, you'll find that the available textures in the list are restricted to textures which match the size of currently selected textures. So if I remove them all, I can select from all of the available textures in my blend file. But when I add a texture, you'll see that my choice of textures gets severely restricted because I have very few textures in this file which actually match in size. So that's what resizing your textures does. And as we've seen before, here at the bottom we have the option to create a bottom-up atlas or a top-down atlas for external 3D engines. And that is the Atlas Maker panel.